What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 668 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk Hot Tags of the Week. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, joined as always by Callum Wiggins.
Hello.
And, of course, all of you listening. So, as we go along here and we say what we gotta say, we want to know what you have to say. Drop your thoughts in the comments section below and tell us anything that you want to chime in. You're on with all these different topics. Keep in mind as well, all the other good things. Click on the like button. Make sure you are subscribed. Ring that notification bell. Join the Patreon or the YouTube channel membership. Get access to early stuff, whether it is the stuff we record way in advance, or if it's things like the Darkcast tier, the Pick Your Poison tier, all that good stuff. Thanks button also helps us out too if you want to toss a little spare change our way. Redbubble and TeePublic, where you can get merchandise. And keep in mind the Discord server as well for just chatting it up at any random time. Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. Let's get the party started here. We actually don't have a whole lot of hot tags to break down this week. Kind of a slow news week, which that's perfectly fine. That happens once in a while. But we've been, kind of knocking out some other content. So if you haven't already checked out the main events for this week, we finished out what we had for the roster tier lists for all 4 of those episodes. Go back and check out the AEW ones from last week, the men's and women's rosters. This week we did the WWE men's and women's rosters. And for anybody who's wondering about what our next main event's going to be, most likely something like Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know exactly when we're going to record, but we're going to do a Found Outs table of In Your House Bad Blood, the original In Your House. So we had done prior the In Your House Bad Blood. We had done the Hell in a Cell match, but that was just the Hell in a Cell match. And I think it was Wago and I, in 2016 or something crazy. So yeah, it's been a long time since I've rewatched that match, and we're going to watch the other matches to go along with it too. We got that coming up. We got Bad Blood, of course, after that. And then, we're going to try to record some stuff in advance a little bit. I have put most of the finishing touches on my Halloween Havoc Ultimate Fantasy Spooking card. So I'm going to be recording that in advance. And I don't know when I'm going to record that either, but since that is going to be something I'm going to put earlier than it is going to be scheduled for, you're going to have easy early access to that on the YouTube channel membership. So again, everybody keep that in mind. And I guess let's just get the party started with these hot tags, which are they're lukewarm in some ways. But let's talk about this idea of AEW Shockwave. We had mentioned this before, that they had trademarked the name Shockwave, and we talked a little bit about it last hot tags, and the idea of just it sounds like it could be another TV show, and how do they have the time for it and all. Now the thing going around is that it's potentially going to just replace Rampage outright. And I'm of a couple different opinions about that. I like the name Shockwave. I think that the name Rampage is perfectly fine too. I think it's a little strange that Rampage's logo is electric, and then there's Shockwave. It's kind of almost like if we end up keeping Rampage and then there's Shockwave, they need to sort of change the Rampage logo to be not all this electricity, because that would be a little bit strange. But I don't think that changing the name and keeping the same concept would make any difference. If that's what they're going for, and they think that it's going to be all right, well, Rampage, everybody associates Rampage with those are matches that don't necessarily matter as much, so we're going to call it Shockwave, and that'll make all the difference. That only makes a difference for a week or two. And we've seen WWE do this. We've seen AEW do this with Dark and Elevation and all. WWE with Main Event and Superstars and NXT Level Up. Probably with anything else along those lines, it's going to be the same thing, where if you don't consistently put the effort into it, then it just reverts back to that anyway. So I kind of hope that, as much as I don't want them to just add an extra hour of television, and we're going to talk about this for SmackDown too, because we're already oversaturated. I don't think it's a great idea to just be well, we're going to go with Shockwave. We're going to get rid of Rampage. That just disappears entirely. And then that'll make all the difference, and we could book it the same. I think that they would need to change their philosophy a little bit, but depending on if this is their strategy or not, how are you feeling about this potential replacement idea?
Well, no one goes into a new television program thinking it's just going to be a nothing throwaway thing. Even I would say even the ideas of like main event and NXT Level Up and all these other stuff that you mentioned from the WWE side of things, and Rampage and Dark Elevation before that, and like people go into that with the best intentions of making it a good show. I mean, people forget that like Dark Elevation used to have matches featuring Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega on it and things like that, and then eventually it just loses priority because in the same way, like WWE's focus is always going to be on Raw, SmackDown, and then NXT on a slight level with that, and AEW's focus is always going to be on Dynamite, and so everything has to like fall at the wayside a little bit because you always have to put your best stuff on Dynamite, and especially like in the AEW side of things where you don't have a distinguished like rosters for the separate TV shows, it means that Dynamite is your flagship show. That's the one that most people watch, and so you're going to just like gravitate to put all of your good stuff on there, which means that any other show, be it Collision, Rampage, or this new Shockwave thing, is always going to be left with the equivalent of like table scraps, because you can't, because it's always like the awful P2 situation. Like you got to say, you got to put more good stuff onto these shows to make people watch. But then if people don't watch compared to the other Dynamite, people then just criticize you for putting stuff on there and not, well, you should put it on Dynamite because that's the show that everyone watches. And then you're just in a constant loop of, well, do you want us to make this show watchable with more interesting like stuff that you have to see, or do you want us to put all that stuff on Dynamite because it means you don't have to watch this show instead?
Yeah, so, same as the whole Will Ospreay is fighting Ricochet on TV. Why is that a TV match instead of a pay-per-view match? And then why are the pay-per-view matches filler from the TV? Or why is the TV going to not have a title match? Yeah, it's a catch-22, like you're saying.
Yeah, well, as I say, like at the end of the day, you just have to block it out and like not listen to people complain about that. Like I always roll my eyes about people that complain about matches not being on pay-per-view. Wow, you're so angry that you don't have to pay for this match. So I think that, but I think with like Shockwave, as I say, there is every chance that if it is replacing Rampage, that it ends up falling into the same pattern as Rampage. If they do decide to just continue to put the full focus on Dynamite and like to a lesser Collision. So, but I think that the purpose of Shockwave is to replace Rampage, but not in just the loop of the Warner Brothers Discovery thing. I think this is the show that they're shopping out to, whether it be networks or other avenues outside of the Warner Brothers Discovery package, to essentially use that as another avenue to just attract different eyes to the products that aren't just their regular viewership. So I would imagine that they would just be taking Rampage off to just say, okay, we're just going to focus on Dynamite and Collision are our two big shows, and everything's going to happen there. But then we see if we shop around a 1 hour or 2 hour long show for, let's say, FS1 or something like that, and just see how it does on there, and just expose you to a slightly different audience, get you talked about by a different network as well, and just see how that goes. So that's what I kind of envision that the plan for Shockwave is. As I say, it might be wrong. It might just be just a direct swap for Rampage in order to try and, at least in the short term, carve away the stigma that's associated with the term like Rampage. So, like, if a match or anything it takes place in Rampage, you just inevitably feel like it doesn't matter. So, replacing the name might help shake that stigma. But yeah, that's what I think. I think Shockwave is going to be a kind of an external show outside of their like new TV deal that they'll be putting in place with WBD pretty soon.
Depending on when it comes with like all their different stuff of like their contract stuff, which what's like 175 million, I think is what
170 is what's being bandied around, which is, for context, it's based on what people estimate for their current deals now is around about 70 million a year across like their Warner Brothers deal. So that would be obviously over double if that number proves to be accurate. It might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less. Like that's just the number being bandied around right now. We won't know for certain until the like press release comes out saying what the deal is and what the terms of it are. But regardless, it represents a if those numbers are anywhere accurate, then it represents like a massive increase for AEW. Like, most people expect that would make them profitable, which is, that's the level that you want to be at. And yeah, saying 3 years with a 1 year option on top of that. So that's basically what's being bandied around right now. So we have to wait and see, and then we'll make the kind of the full confirmation once they've officially announced it. But yeah, as I say, we don't know what the parameters of that package are at all, though. We don't know if like pay-per-views.
Does that include pay-per-views to max? Yeah. Does that include having some kind of, you can't put anything on any other network exclusive right things? Does that screw over Bleacher Report in any way? Like, that's where a lot of this is. We can all talk about everybody wants to go like, okay, well, is that number good or whatever? We're all not economists and business managers, and we don't know all the fine print and everything. But one of the things that I don't know, as an outsider that doesn't understand a lot of these things, and maybe this is a completely stupid idea that if somebody were to talk to me with like an economic background, they'd be like, you're a fucking moron. But I look at a name like AEW Dark and AEW Dark Elevation and AEW Shockwave and Rampage and all these different things that they had trademarked. Some of them you can't do anything with, like the Roads to the Top thing. They are, they can't do anything with the Rhodes family, and that's a reality show on a different network and all this. But they still do dark matches. And maybe it wouldn't make a big difference, but I kind of think, and this tie into the way that I've done before with WWE, where I've been like, they've got the trademark to Seasons Beatings, so why don't they do like the Seasons Beatings tour? And like, I kind of want them to always repurpose things. So part of me thinks, hey, if you've got dark matches and you've got potential for recording them, even if you just have like one static camera and you don't really want to spend a lot of money on it, upload the dark matches to YouTube and put it on a subscription tier and make a little bit of money that way. And then you can use the AEW Dark thing through that. And if you do any house shows, you can record those in the same like one static camera thing and upload those as part of it too. And Shockwave, whether it's like a replacement for Rampage or not, if it replaces it, I like the name Shockwave better than Rampage. But then if you've got Rampage, use it more for some other kind of thing, like a clip show or something. Like I don't want to see them just take Rampage's hour, this idea that they record matches after Dynamite and then they upload it later on the week on Friday, and just say, okay, well, we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to call it Shockwave. At that point, it's like, all right, well, then I'm not even going to bother to watch the first episode of Shockwave if it's going to be just Rampage with a different logo. And I got a feeling that even if they don't have that intention, that they're going to just do that still. So it's not my favorite scenario that it could happen, but then again, we don't have confirmation for it, so we're just speculating. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. But on that same token, now there's chatter that SmackDown is going to temporarily get a third hour.
Yeah, so that was came out on like WrestleVotes radio, basically saying that SmackDown would be increasing to 3 hours, with obviously Raw being off the USA Network as of January. So from January, it would be SmackDown would go to 3 hours on a Friday. And then it was added on top of that, this would potentially only be a 6-month exercise stretching into July. So, yeah, like, it feels like when one thing comes good in terms of Raw only coming to 2 hours, and then we'll be moving over to Netflix, and obviously we don't know what the parameters are for that. I'm still fully in the belief that it's going to be a 3 hour long show on Netflix. I've not seen anything to suggest otherwise, just other than people's like feign hope that they're going to go back to 2 hours with and that's just people's desire beyond actual, any evidence to the contrary. Whereas SmackDown going to 3 hours, it makes sense. If they're losing a 3-hour show, then why wouldn't they want to keep a 3-hour show if they can do it? So the only option to do that is, SmackDown's the only show we've got, so that's the one that's going to be 3 hours long. Yeah, I imagine that's disappointing for a lot of people, as I'd imagine the case, because it's just 3 hours is too long for a televised TV show of any kind, let alone a wrestling show, when fundamentally your pay-per-views don't really have enough content to fill 3 hours, let alone. But I think that, I mean, I'm, I guess, skeptical of the 6-month thing. I think I can understand a 6-month trial, but I don't imagine that this was going to be a case of, okay, shall I absolutely cut it off? If the 3 hours have been a success and they've been getting some good either ratings or revenue off the back of it, then they'll keep it 3 hours. So,
and that's
people have to just get used to that. Then
that's something that I'm like, I don't want.
No wrestling fan, no matter how big a fan of WWE they are, they don't want to have 3 hours of SmackDown, because look at what SmackDown is nowadays. I mean, don't get me wrong, they would need to buff up the roster, because SmackDown has historically had a smaller roster than Raw, because Raw has been the 3-hour show and they've been the 2-hour show. So they're going to need to bulk it up with some more people, or feature people on the show that don't often get featured heavily. But I mean, fundamentally, I say I don't watch SmackDown hours, full episodes from start to finish. But from what I can gather based on Netflix, it's mainly just Roman or Solo or Cody talking for half an hour of the show every time. They're gonna have to, in order to make up the difference, they're gonna have to literally just be talking for an hour of the show. And people will lap that up because they do. But yeah, it just feels like there isn't enough depth on SmackDown to warrant a third hour.
I mean, they can't. It's kind of the same thing as the Shockwave thing. If you continue to do things the same way, you can't expect different results. And if you look at the way that Raw is structured, you got to assume at best that's what SmackDown would be. It would just be that they would do the same formula and they would apply that to Friday nights, which that's a thing that for years everybody's complaining about. 3 hours is too long. It drags too long. It's too many down moments. And how many times do you need to have the 17 minutes start off the show with a promo just to set up a tag team match later on in the main event? It's redundant crap that it'll be interesting to see what they do when Raw goes to 2 hours, because it's they do still tend to apply those same rules to SmackDown, even on the 2-hour thing. It's just that they drag it out a little bit more. And you would hope that they would take this next little chunk of time from the time that Raw is going to be 2 hours, NXT will be 2 hours, and SmackDown will be 2 hours, and that they would go after a few weeks, hey, you know what? It's actually pretty brisky to get through this, and we like it better and we enjoy that more, so maybe we don't do it. But we know that at the end of the day, if they're going to get paid more and they're going to make more money, they're going to take those extra hours across the board no matter what, and then they're just going to tell the writing team, figure it out, and that's it. Because no company, especially not in the current landscape, is going to turn down money for the sake of the fans and or the employees. They're always going to say, figure it out. The bottom line is the most expensive thing, and that's the thing that we care about and the most important. But I can't imagine particularly them just going, all right, you know what, for however many months, whether it's 6 months and then they stop, or if it's in perpetuity, we'll just keep SmackDown the way that it is, but we'll just tack on an extra hour. Because they don't have the depth for it. Within a few weeks, they're going to run out of people and feuds, and there are people that like don't get screen time. Like we haven't seen Pretty Deadly in a match in however long, and maybe that is the difference maker between more stuff with like DIY and with kind of like undercard people like, you know, Giovanni Vinci or whatever. But then again, okay, you add those people into the mix, and then do people really want to see that for a full extra hour? I don't know. So I think that they might be in a position where they might need to call some people up from NXT. And then that becomes, who do you call up from NXT that you don't neuter NXT? Because you can't just go, all right, let's take Trick Williams, let's take Ethan Page, let's take Roxanne Perez and Julia and like all these like top name people, and then leave NXT with nobody. And if you bring the people up that aren't the big names, how many of them are necessarily ready to be on Raw or SmackDown? On the list of people that are on Raw and SmackDown at this particular moment, there aren't a lot of names that I would feel comfortable with that I would say if you put them on SmackDown that they can, I don't know if I would even say succeed, that they can at least tread water, if not outright just succeed. Because again, you take Oba Femi off of NXT, sure, he's going to do great on the main roster, but you're kind of screwing NXT a little bit there. There's like Gallus could go to the main roster and they would fit in, but I don't care to see it. You know?
I think fundamentally, I mean, NXT is just, so you don't want to like absolutely cripple it, but at the end of the day, if you have to sacrifice NXT for SmackDown's quality to go up, then they're going to do it.
I totally do.
So, and I think that, like, as I say, there are people that are currently on the SmackDown roster that really get no airtime whatsoever, and they might just extend out with a few longer matches. Like, so there are ways to get around it and try and make it work. I mean, to be fair to them, and again, I'm not the biggest fan, but at least for their fan base, the recent additions of like 3-hour Raws have been working out well for them, so they just need to apply the same approach for SmackDown. So it's not unfeasible for them to approach things that way and go well. They just need to add more depth, but they are adding more depth because they are, like, the Moxie Machine Guns are coming in soon. But obviously they're likely to go to NXT, but like they might go up to the main roster if they see this. If this is rumor comes a reality, they're bringing the Lucha Bros in, and they've got Stephanie Vicaire still to come in, and Delta still to come in, and like who knows if there's any other people that we're going to be talking about soon that might be floating around that they might be interested in bringing in. So
yeah, we'll have to put a pin in that and talk about that guy in a moment.
So as I say, and like people like, I mean, Roxanne Perez like absolutely will have to be coming up to the main roster soon, because if she loses that title to Julia, then there's nothing else for her to do on NXT, so she has to come up at some point. Mm-hmm. You'd imagine that like Ethan Page has done like well in the SC role, that he come in and be just a mid-carder in the main roster once he loses the title back to Trick Williams, probably. So there are plenty of people in NXT that could go up and feel, you know, they're not going to go in and be main eventers on SmackDown, but very rarely does that happen anyway. And it's a case of it's not going to hinder the top level of NXT to bring in like a team like Alice or someone like a Sean Spears just to fill a role on SmackDown. But they might necessarily need to bring those people up in order just to, you know, fill in time on SmackDown and have enough people for the stars of SmackDown to beat on just a random episode of TV. So, you know, you can't just always have Cody Rhodes beat one of Grayson Waller and Austin Theory over and over and over again. So, but that's just a general thing about SmackDown and Raw and any other show. Like, you need to have that variety there, and it might just be a case that they use the hour to showcase NXT. There's ways they could do that as well. Just be like, almost treat it like a additional hour of NXT, or just say like, okay, this would be a chance to bring some people from NXT onto the show to face the main roster talent and see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, they could always use people on these shows without fully calling them up. Like they can have Austin Theory and Grayson Waller in a tag team match, and it can be, instead of them fighting Apollo Crews and Baron Corbin 7 weeks in a row, hey, this week we're going to have them up against Axiom and Nathan Fraser, or Malik Blade and Idris Enofe, and utilize them in a way that it's like, if you enjoyed the match that these guys put on, then you should check them out on Tuesdays on NXT. And we've seen people pop in and do that here and there on Monday Night Raw over the course of like the past like 2 years or so. Like once in a while, they've been like, you know, at random, here's like a, I don't know, or a Mensa or somebody that like, you're just kind of like, oh, okay, that's neat. And then they usually only do it a little bit. But with the main people that stood out to me when I started thinking about this, I wrote up a little EWN question of the day about, you know, would you like if there's a third hour and that kind of thing. More than anybody, there's one name that stood out to me of like, oh, I could see them bringing this person in and actually contributing to that extra hour in a way that can fill time for both in-ring stuff and promos. I think the biggest get would be the D'Angelo family. Downside to that is that takes a huge chunk of NXT out, because that's not only you take out Tony D, but you take out Stax, Lucas Crucifino, and Adriano Rizzo. You lose somebody on the tag team division and the mid-card division and the women's division and the main event kind of side, but also they do a lot of skits and stuff at NXT. But then you take those skits in NXT and you bring them to SmackDown, that fills that void quite a bit. And then maybe that's where you can bring in some of these other people that have not had a chance to do anything yet. Maybe they start getting characters that actually get over and they get a little bit more time too. Because I couldn't tell you fuck all about the personality of Uriah Connors, or I don't know who Drake Moreau is, or Jasper Troy. So, I mean, I think, like you were saying, if you need to sacrifice something, you sacrifice NXT more than you do SmackDown. And I think Tony D is at a point that he could fit in and he could do well. I'd buy Tony D'Angelo beating like a who's like a mid-carder on SmackDown right now, like
Austin Theory.
Austin Theory. I wouldn't be shocked if Tony D'Angelo were to be in a match with Shinsuke Nakamura and beat him at this point, or to beat, say, Santos Escobar again, or obviously there's certain levels to things. If Tony D'Angelo is going up against Solo Sikoa, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Solo's going to win that one. But I could see that working. I could see like a couple different people shifting around, and that's interesting in and of itself, because if they do end up having to move roster stuff around, then that kind of becomes a de facto mini draft in some ways, if they were to like swap some names. But you gotta play around with the rosters a little bit here and there, and certainly there are people in NXT that are more than capable of coming up to the main roster. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, because I don't want that third hour of SmackDown just because of the amount of oversaturation that there is there. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but if we're talking about the idea of potentially moving around rosters and stuff, we got to talk about arguably the biggest story for this week, which is not as big of a story as you would think that it would be because of what we've been talking about for the past like 2 years or so, but it is still arguably the biggest story of this week, that Miro is seemingly just done in AEW and requesting his release. And this is a long time coming. This guy has been on my radar for what the fuck are they doing with him since, I mean, it had to be not that long after he had dropped that TNT title, which was, let me double check here, I think it was 2022 if I remember correctly. Let's see what Cage Match says. Cage Match says
no, it's
2021. Yeah. So yeah, September 29th, 2021, Sammy Guevara beat him for the title on Dynamite. It wasn't long after that that I remember being like, God damn, Miro's fallen down. And for all this time, from that point onward, guess how many matches he actually wrestled? Period. Not even
I know the numbers anyway.
Oh, you took a look at it already?
Well, they put it in like the report about his requesting his release and stuff like that. He had 4 matches in 2022 and 7 matches in 2023.
It's insane. And like, maybe he was injured for part of it. I know he was going through the divorce. He went to Bulgaria. Like, there are things behind the scenes that we are not aware of that would get in the way of that. But at the same time, even the matches that he's had, if you look on like Cage Match is such a great resource, everybody. You really need to check them out if you don't go there. There's such a steep decline of TNT title, beating all these people, having a great run with that. And then it's like, okay, he beats Orange Cassidy in an eliminator tournament. He loses to Bryan Danielson, which is like, hey, that's, doesn't matter if you lose to Bryan Danielson. It's like, oh man, you lost to The Undertaker. What a jobber. Like, Then it's Johnny Elite. Okay, Johnny TV, but that was when he was first coming in. It's still not that bad. Wins a qualifying match over Ethan Page. Okay, qualifying match, cool. Loses a 4-way for the AEW All-Atlantic title. Still in a great position overall, even if it's taking way too long to get to that point, because at that point it had been nearly a year and he had only wrestled 5 matches. And then you just start seeing the drop-off from that all-out Darby Allin, Miro, and Sting thing, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me against the House of Black. Then he just beats Tony Nese, beats Anthony Henry, beats Nick Comoroto, beats Powerhouse Hobbs on All Out suddenly a year later, and it's like, well, you had 3 matches this year, let's put you against Hobbs in a Meet Mayhem or whatever match. Action Andretti, Daniel Garcia on Collision, and Andrade with that whole World's End thing, which was just trash. This has been a shit 3 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the TNT title run was like excellent. I thought that it was so well put together, and he was in his position really well. They were booking him strong, and eventually that has to come to an end. And they decided to utilize that build up, told the whole story about the neck of sand gimmick, and then eventually Sammy Guevara is the guy to take advantage of that and finally get to beat him. But yeah, I mean, all of this is filtered in between like a list of like injuries that he's been suffering, but then the undercurrent of all of this has been the rumor and speculation about his failure to cooperate with creative, and this idea that he would kind of refuse to lose matches and if ideas were pitched to him which either didn't sit right with him or would involve him, coming up short at the end, then he wouldn't sign off on them. So I feel like, as I say, we don't know the full extent of it because we can't talk to him or Tony Khan or anyone else directly about what was going on with that in that whole situation. But you have to imagine that they wouldn't be like just letting him sit there without pitching anything to him or like giving him certain ideas or stories or things to do, especially if he is on like a pretty sizable contract, because in between the period we're talking about 2021 and now when he's requested release, he did sign a new contract,
which is wild.
Well, at the time it was like that was 2022, and like he was injured at the time between like the 2021 going onwards after the whole Bryan Danielson match. So it's not unheard of. Like, he probably was kind of excited about it, but then he probably found out that they weren't planning on pushing him immediately towards the world title, because that was the only real like next step up at that point. That's the time when, yeah, you were introducing the All Atlantic Championship at the time, but
still mid-card belt.
Yeah. I assume that he thought that he would be elevated towards the main event world title scene, and they just didn't have plans for it, because then in this time, this is when AEW is picking up Bryan Danielson, picking up CM Punk, picking up like pushing Hangman Page towards the top. You've got Adam Cole in as well. Like it's the landscape shifts in that moment of time where Miro becomes, I don't want to say obsolete, but becomes a little bit more. It's going to be harder for him to break into that upper echelon.
Not only is he not the shiny new toy, which let's be honest, it happens not just in AEW, but it does seem to be a little bit more of a thing in AEW in a lot of ways with like the, somebody just comes in, they get a real push for like 3 months and then they kind of, Deonna Purrazzo, like Brian Cage, that kind of effect. But yeah, you get bigger names too. And depending on the level of creative control or, denial rights that he has in his contract, if he was going to AEW thinking, look, WWE never gave me the push to the main event that I should have had, but I'm going to be a big fish in a small pond, and they're damn sure going to give me a world title in this company. And then you start getting bigger fish in there, that pond gets smaller and smaller in a different way. And then you start getting pushed out of there. And, not to keep up this fish metaphor, but if there's always a bigger fish, I'm going to go with a lot of these other names over Miro for building my main event scene over. Yeah. Well, especially if he's got all these like backstage things where I'm not going to lose to this person, I'm not going to do this or whatever, then I'm going to prioritize the people that are more willing to be a little bit more flexible.
Well, I think that like Miro quite comfortably fits into this collection of AEW wrestlers that sees AEW as the minor leagues, as it were, and that they're only there because WWE doesn't want them right now, or they didn't have the time in WWE. When if things change after a couple of years, like, okay, if WWE are interested again, then I'll go over, because fundamentally he's now requested his release, which means that he has visions elsewhere. So seemingly he's thought that there's kind of no room to maneuver now. So if he has requested his release, then it means that he has visions on what he would do after that. And we don't know whether that is continuing in wrestling, but you imagine that would be the case. Otherwise, he would just sit on his contract until it runs out, collect all the money, and then retire. But he decided that he wants to be released from it, and I think Tony Khan would be stupid not to allow his release, because they're not doing anything with him, and he's probably on a decent sum of money, so they can put that money to better use elsewhere. And yeah, so it either means that he's going to go back to WWE, which is, would be the natural conclusion to come to, because, that's the place that he was at, and they probably would be able to find a place for him. But if his vision is being a main event level guy, he's not going to be that in WWE.
No. You got to look at somebody like an Andrade. Not everybody that's going to come back is going to get the Cody Rhodes treatment.
Exactly. So he'll be at a certain level, but, maybe being a certain level in WWE is more appealing to him than being a certain level in AEW. But then the other alternative is, well, maybe, because there is one promotion that would build everything of him, and that's TNA. They would fall at their feet, I think, for a guy like Miro, because he is someone who I don't think has megastar potential, but he is, on his day, he's a great wrestler, he's a powerhouse, he's got a great look, and he's a charismatic talker. Mm-hmm. So he would be an instant, not just main event guy, but that's a guy you give a year-long world title reign to, if you're so inclined. So it just depends on what his priorities are. I assume that he'd go back to WWE. But yeah, I think that if he has requested his release, then thanks for the year-long period heading into 2021 with that title reign. But yeah, it's very much not going to make any waves if he decides to leave now.
No, I think it's the smart move for all parties. I can't imagine that his status in AEW is going to change anytime soon, if ever. And at this point, if there's a way, depending on how their contracts are set up and stuff, if there's a way for Tony Khan to just be like, all right, I'll let you go and I won't have to continue to pay you, and that'll be a cost cutting thing, all the more reason to just let him go. You're not going to use him. If you were going to, you would have used him over this time period. It's not like it's, hey, he was being used really well or even consistently and not necessarily really well, but if he was consistently used over the past year, or he was just injured recently or something along those lines, then I'd make more of an argument that maybe you could sit the contract out and say, hey, maybe a month from now things change and we get back on track or whatever. At this point, it's not going to happen. It's been 3 years of not using this guy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Get rid of him and use that money elsewhere, whether it's to sign somebody else or to re-sign somebody else and just give them a little bit of a bump in their contract to keep them, or to allocate those funds to, I don't know, the production or whatever. Like, there's no shortage of money that can't be used in some capacity. And if he is wasting money, get rid of him and let him go elsewhere, because he's not going to make a game-changing difference outside of the company either. Like, if he goes to WWE again, that's not going to affect AEW. If he goes to TNA is not going to become the hottest thing in the world now, and suddenly Warner Brothers wants to give them a deal and all that. Like, it's not going to happen. It's going to maybe take one option away from you that you aren't using for matches. And like you said, if Miro wants to be a world champion and that's the sticking point, he's not going to get it in WWE. He's not going to get it in AEW. He would be great in that position for TNA. I'd make an argument that he could maybe succeed in like a New Japan, but I don't think he could be a New Japan like world champion. I think that they would probably just give him something like the strong open weight title, or along those lines.
He could definitely be a New Japan world champion. I would definitely think that he could do, but it's more of a case of application and how long he wants to. I think for that kind of commitment, you do need to be fully engaged with New Japan, and they do consistent tours all the time, and he'd probably have to move to Japan. So that's a big ask for him. It's a big ask for anybody, not just saying for him, but so it'd be whether he'd be willing to do that side of things. But as I say, I feel like the inevitable destination is that he's going to find being a mid-card guy in WWE in the way that he wasn't fine being an upper mid-card guy in AEW. So, yeah, and as I say, they can potentially utilize that money that they're going to be saving on Miro's contract to invest into another signing, like a Kevin Owens. So,
yeah, then that's a game-changing guy that you really need to invest in. And if Kevin Owens doesn't want to re-sign with WWE, which it's a possibility, his contract is coming up and he hasn't re-signed yet, then you focus your attention on getting Kevin Owens, not in keeping Miro. For that matter, not even in keeping, I would say you don't even keep Daniel Garcia on that front, but I would way more spend the money on keeping Daniel Garcia than Miro.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you basically just hand Daniel Garcia half of Miro's contract and say sign, essentially, once he's gone, because you have to invest in the future, as well as if you're looking at a guy like Kevin Owens who just feels like a more natural fit into AEW. So yeah, as I say, I think that it's the best decision all round, and the only reason Tony Khan wouldn't do it is because he's being petty, and he's not above that, but hopefully in this situation he sees financial sense.
Yeah, so I mean, we might be seeing some movement on that front, or it could be the type of thing that he continues to just keep his contract, and Tony Khan's just like, nope, you're going to sit it out, and kind of be in the same position that it seems like Ricky Starks is in, because Starks is I think it's 2026 is his contract is over.
I don't know. I don't know if anyone actually has officially what his contract is.
Let's see, when does Ricky Starks' contract with AEW end? I think I had seen something about it being in 2026. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I can't seem to find the information yet. Yeah, but I don't know. I just don't see the point in keeping people and paying them if you're not going to use them. And if they're not happy and you don't really want to do anything with them, save the money, get rid of them. Yeah. Allow WWE, if they're interested in buying out the rest of the contract or something, allow them to do that. Maybe, there's a lot of options there. But if you had to pick where Miro should go, that you would want to see him go or stay, what would you pick?
I mean, I don't really want to see him anywhere, so you can just go to WWE as far as I'm concerned.
No, like, matches in particular, you'd be like, I actually would really like to see him in New Japan because of XYZ or something?
Nothing that that I would go out of my way to say no.
As much as it would make sense for me to say I'd rather just have him in WWE because I kind of just want everybody to be in WWE unless I think that they fit in a better style elsewhere, I kind of want him to go to TNA. I don't know, something about it. Give him that world title reign there, and then he can scratch that itch. And then in the future, he comes back to WWE, when they buy TNA.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd say, like, it might be best for him into, like his stature to go to TNA and be the biggest fish in a small pond. But I don't think it would be good for the rest of the TNA roster for Miro to be there.
Like behind the scenes, or you mean just like
pecking order? Essentially, if the idea is that he would go there to be, like, the only reason he would go there is to be pushed as like the world champion and be like a dominant, all-conquering thing. Because why else would you go there unless when you can pay probably a lot more to just be a middle card guy in WWE? So basically saying like, oh, put me in there and then just have me on top beating all your guys. So I imagine that would be the I guess the on top of the contract that you'd get would be the recompense for signing with TNA over WWE.
Who's the NWA champion right now?
I believe it's Tom Latimer, formerly known as Bram.
Huh. That sounded worse than I was intended to be. NWA, I haven't been paying any attention to NWA for such a long time, pre-Tyrus even, but according to the roster, it's EC3.
I might have won it back, and I'm pretty sure that Tom Latimer did win it, so I don't know whether it's changed hands over again.
Tom Latimer is the NWA National Heavyweight Champion.
See, I'm 100% certain they've had the match with EC3, and like I'm sure I heard somewhere they've had the match and that that Latimer beat him for it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maxie Impaler is the women's TV and world TV champion. She's got there's two TV titles. Okay. Shows how there's King Bees. I don't know any of these people.
So Tom Latimer is currently signed to the National Wrestling Alliance, where he's the current NWA World Heavyweight Champion in his first reign.
Oh, so they didn't even update the roster page?
Probably not, no. He beat him at the 76th anniversary show on August 31st.
Wow, so they were not even bothering to do that. That goes to show you NWA. There's a GIMP character in NWA.
You acting like you're surprised.
Gags the GIMP. Jesus. No wonder I don't watch the show. Yeah. So maybe he goes there and feuds with a guy that's calling himself Kratos. So he's just go ahead and steal from something else. And as far as little championships are concerned, a real quick mention. This isn't really a big thing, but Red Velvet's got a new custom strap for her Women's World TV Championship title belt. Looks fine. It's a red strap. Nothing really big on that. Another couple little bits of news here and there. This is something that I know nothing about, but you brought it up ahead of time. Samoa Joe will appear in the video game Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. I have no idea what any of these things mean.
So Yakuza is a very popular Japanese video game series, and Like a Dragon is kind of a spin-off off the back of that, after the kind of protagonists of the main Yakuza series got too old to kind of continue on. So Like a Dragon is like the new generation, and Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is going to be like their latest game. And Samoa Joe has been featured in the trailer for it, so that'd be cool for him to have his likeness be in a video game. I imagine, I don't know whether he's playing a character or whether it's literally just him playing Samoa Joe in it, because Yakuza in the past, like Yakuza 6, had Kazuchika Okada and Hiroshi Tanahashi and Toru Yano and Tetsuya Naito in it at one point, so they're not adverse for putting wrestlers in. We've seen in the past that AEW has had the kind of helped promote the last Yakuza game by having that big 8-man tag with the Don Callis family versus it was Omega and Jericho and Kota Ibushi and Paul White in that 8-man tag street fight that saw Paul White got suplexed on the or body slammed onto the car to never be seen again. And so it's good for Samoa Joe, just getting his face and lights out there. It might also be part of the reason why he's unavailable right now, because I know he was doing stuff for that TV show that he's in. But so maybe this is also part of it. So who knows? Maybe we'll see. Hopefully, we'll get him back on TV soon. But it's good that he's exploring other adventures as well.
Not something I imagine I'm going to be playing in the future, but it's always cool to see Samoa Joe doing some other projects here and there. And I liked little bits of his acting that I've seen. So I'm down for him to do more voiceover work, or even, live action stuff like Twisted Metal and all. I mean, he didn't do the voice for Twisted Metal, but you know what I mean. Let's get into this TV recap side of things. Usually, we don't need to break down every single match that happened and all that good stuff. You guys can find that stuff on smarkandmama.com. But Judgment Day retained their tag titles over the New Day, and there is a potential split happening between Xavier Woods and Kofi Kingston. Not something I really want to happen, to be honest. I kind of want them to instead be in a position where Kofi had said, well, the thing that was different was we had Big E before, and he was like a buffer between us, and, we just kind of lost our step and all. My ideal scenario here is a situation where Big E is healthy enough that he can return, and this is all setting that up. But, of course, that's might potentially be asking too much. But I don't want the New Day to split and do a typical feud between Woods and Kofi, because I don't think it's going to lead anywhere. I don't think that either of them is really going to be pushed all that much. So then it's just going to ruin a tag team. And there's maybe only a few examples of tag teams that never split up. I'd rather the New Day be one of those.
Yeah, I think if they were ever going to do a split that led to something like super meaningful for either guy, then they've missed the boat on that quite significantly. So I don't see the rationale for doing it. I wouldn't lean towards splitting them up. But if they feel like there's literally nothing more for them to do as a tag team, and fundamentally they haven't been pushed as a tag team act on the main roster for a good 3 years or so. So it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if they did go down that route, but it's probably not going to amount to anything if they do.
I mean, certainly we know that it's not going to be a matter of Big O coming in and replacing Big E since he's gone. Did you see any clips of this Braun Strowman and Bronson Reed segment?
Oh, that was so much fun to watch.
Mm.
I saw the whole 4-minute long clip on Twitter, and it's just two big guys running into each other constantly. What's not to love about that segment? If everything the WWE did was like that, I would still be watching, but it's obviously not. But I mean, I heard nothing but good things about this episode of Raw from people online and people that I listen to when they're like reviewing that stuff, because you had that awesome Bronson Reed and Braun Strowman segment of them just throwing people at each other and slamming through barricades and drywall and tables and everything and flipping a golf cart over. But then you also had that Bianca Belair Io Sky match, which got really good reviews as well.
You put those two in the ring together, they're going to have a good match.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But just giving them time to just go out there and do stuff, and also having like Io get the kind of shock win over Bianca is like a cool thing to see as well. And then, yeah, I think that there was, continuing to build up the Punk stuff, and with McIntyre, and like trying to add a bit more animosity into that, and had like Dragunov and Pete Dunne as well. So like there's plenty of stuff to like about the Raw thing beyond the fact that it's 3 hours long and who's got time to watch all of that. But it's but yeah, I didn't hear kind of too many negative things at all coming out of that episode.
Yeah, they had a good balance of a lot of things. Like, Jey Uso cuts a promo with Braun Breaker, and Jay's telling him, some digs at some certain things, like, hey, this is going to be a quicker run than your NFL career. And then, like, he hits Breaker with a spear of his own. So later on in the night, when they do this whole big Judgment Day thing and Jey Uso comes out to help, he gets speared by Braun Breaker. And, like, they kind of, like, they balanced it out pretty well overall. It ended up being a solid episode of Raw. So I recommend people to go and check out a couple things from that if they haven't checked that out already. On the side of NXT, that's, typical fashion. There are good things, there are bad things, there are things you should check out if you missed it. There are things that you can very easily skip and you wouldn't be missing a damn thing. But they had the start of that as a contract signed between Ethan Page and Trick Williams, which nobody ended up signing the contract because they ended up just fighting. And then that led to a segment that I didn't think was all that fantastic. That led to Tyrese Halliburton, who, when we talked about him last, I had said this, so it still rings true. I don't follow other sports. I don't care about other sports. When people go, oh my God, that's world famous basketball player so-and-so, or that's such a big football icon, or this baseball player that, like, there's a guy named like Otani right now that's like really popular or something, I think, and it's like, all right, well, I don't follow it, so it doesn't matter to me. When they bring those people in, it doesn't connect with me, and that's perfectly fine. Appeal to a lot of different audiences. If they booked this straight entirely for me, a lot of people would end up being annoyed at lacking things that doesn't work for them. But when you're like, Tyrese Halliburton's going to be the thing that's going to make the big difference in that contract signing because he's going to really hold down the fort. That segment was stupid. He gets booed, and Trick, God bless him, tries to help it. And he's all like, effectively, yeah, they're booing you, but you're supposed to be a babyface in this, so let me just act like it's okay. And the big gotcha moment of the whole thing is CM Punk, because earlier in the night, CM Punk came out. He was supposed to do some kind of an announcement. He got interrupted by Roxanne, who denounces him as her pro wrestling father, essentially. She says, I always looked up to you and all this stuff. Of course, I always did prefer your wife, which of course everybody's just like, oh my God, AJ Lee confirmed, And Punk tries to separate Julia and Roxanne, but he comes back around to saying, hey, I never got a chance to say this earlier, but I'm going to be the special guest referee for October 1st. And he is going to be in the middle of Ethan Page and Trick Williams. And he's like, well, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm special guest referee, you guys can fight it out right now. The Tyrese Halliburton element of that, I don't know if that really got them any kind of extra views or not. I didn't bother to check the ratings stuff. I don't really care in the grand scheme. That sucked. Punk being special guest referee, he has nothing at all that is attached to one of these two guys, so that's a little strange. But hey, it's in Chicago. It's gonna get a pop. I'm down for it. It's fine.
Yeah, sounds like they'll harness Punk to do a lot of stuff. So yeah, can't really, as I say, it's not gonna encourage me to tune in, but I'm sure other people will.
couple other little things that happened throughout this episode worth mentioning. Tony D was mad at Hammerstone for losing last week against Obafemi. That led to a match where Tony D just walked out, so Hammerstone won by countout. Can't quite put the TNA guy over with a pinfall, but he gotta give him a countout thing. And that led to a little bit of a Rocky 4 type of moment of, hey, I don't know if I can beat this guy. Well, I believe in you. We'll train you a little bit more. So we're going to get Tony D versus Obafemi at some point in the future. They never specifically said it's going to happen at a certain date. I don't know if that's the Shawn Michaels rule of the you lose, then you get another title match, and then you win. Could happen. We might see Tony D as the North American champion pretty soon. I don't know if I really want that to happen or not, but worse things could happen too. Tatum Paxley and Lyra Valkyria teamed up against Wendy Chu and Rosemary. There was nothing to talk about in that segment. They just did the match, and that was it. No Quarter Catch Crew has everybody together, and that led to Ren Sinclair. After Charlie Dempsey said, make a name for yourself, Ren Sinclair just slapped Kelani Jordan. So we're going to get Kelani Jordan versus Ren Sinclair for that NXT Women's North American title coming up soon. There were some backstage stuff with Fatal Influence and setting up the whole idea of Lola Vice and Jada Parker and all that. So they're telling the story. It's working its way through. It's nothing really like groundbreaking. Same thing with Brooks Jensen and Deion Lennox. Same thing with just setting up Zachary Wentz in the street fight with Wes Lee. Same thing with Ridge Holland. It's a lot of like by the numbers type stuff, but not a bad episode of NXT. Just one of those ones where, hey, if you watched this live, there are some down moments. If you skipped some segments, you're probably going to skip Eddie Thorpe versus Shanti the Adonis. You're not going to lose anything on that front. Dynamite. We got a couple things to talk about on that front too. The setup for Grand Slam has been happening, and we still don't know 100% of what that card is going to be, either for Dynamite or Collusion. Not Collusion. We do know some matches that are lingering, as far as that they announced something to happen, but we don't know when. And one of those things was the World Trios titles will be defended against, we don't know, and we don't know which night, but that's not even as much of the interesting thing here. It was the way that they approached announcing this, which was Pac and Claudio, and then, eventually Jon Moxley and Marina Shapiro standing there saying to Will or Yuta, hey, look, basically nut up and come here next week and defend the titles with us, little motherfucker. And I like that they're doing like a good cop, bad cop thing with Pac and Claudio, where Pac is basically just the angry guy who's like, get your shit together and let's do the job. And Claudio is the, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed type of dad. And they keep saying things like, the type of man that we raised you to be at all. I love this like fatherly thing that they've got going on. I think this is a fun way to tell this story.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole thing they've done with Yuta is great so far, in his response to Danielson's injuries by him basically, like he had the match with Anthony Henry. It was Anthony Henry on Collision, where he basically sleepwalked through the whole match until Henry started mocking the Danielson injury, and then that got Yuta angry, and he started beating up everyone, including Beef at ringside. And just kicked their ass afterwards. But see, in this segment, like he had an interview segment where he came out, forgot that he assumed that the match was happening at Wrestle Dream, but it's actually no Grand Slam, and then Stage Hand came up to him saying that he left his title belt in the locker room. So he's just in total brain fog mode. So
aren't we all?
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see how they approach that trios match. I assume that he'll be there and they'll defend it. It'll be interesting to see who they defend it against, because now you have this kind of weird dynamic within the champions that it kind of really opens up the possibility for titles to change hands to whoever they are facing, unless it's like, I don't know, somebody like, you're not going to get like Serpensko and Angelico and somebody else to win the titles, but if it's like, a Bullet Club Gold or Bang Bang Gang, should I say, or House of Black or something like that, then there's a very real possibility that there's going to be a title change.
So I'm repeating myself from an article that I put up, but I had put up an EWN question of the day about like, how would you book this? And I still stand by what I had mentioned on there for me. If you want to have a title change, you got to go with a big enough team like, like a House of Black or Patriarchy or whatever it might be. But I don't think that it's time to change the titles. I think it's time to change Wheeler as a champion. And I don't know who they would replace him with, but here was my pitch for anybody that isn't going to read that article. And, I don't blame you. Reading sucks. My pitch was basically, since we don't know who they're going to fight, you would assume that they're probably just not going to put them up against a huge team where it's like, oh my God, we just signed these new mega stars or something. They'll probably put them up against somebody like Top Flight. You get Dante and Darius and Action Andretti, and they go out there and they have a good match and whatever, but I would book it where he does kind of, he being Yuta, like not phone in the match, but he has his brain fog moments and all, and that upsets Pac because he's like, get your head in the game. We're about to lose these titles if you don't stop fucking around. And at the end of the whole setup, I would probably have it be that Yuta almost does lose the titles for them. So they retain after Claudio gets the win. And then that leads to them basically beating down Yuta and being like, you know what? You've made your decision by proxy of not being on board with what we're doing. So what we're going to do is you're out of the group. And now we have these trios titles, the two of us, and we get to pick who our third member is going to be. And it's as simple as it could be. You would just go with Moxley in some ways, but I wouldn't. I would have then kind of like a recruitment thing for the next few weeks where Moxley on this episode of Dynamite, for anybody who missed this, they followed it up with Private Party being like, we're interested in fighting for those trios titles and we'll just find another partner and we'll go up against you guys. And then they went after them. They tried to get a little revenge from the previous week when they got jumped by Blackpool Combat Club. Moxley takes a hammer and he says to Isaiah Cassidy, you've been stagnant for these past 5 years. You're exactly in the same position that you were when AEW started. So consider this a gift. I'm going to give you some motivation, essentially. And he hits him in the hand with the hammer. If the story we're going with here is that Moxley is like, look, we need to beat the shit out of these people in this next generation to get them to get off their ass or to make this company better or whatever. I think that that's how they should approach replacing Yuta. We did all we could with Yuta. He made his decision. He's his own man. All those things that they had said before. And he's decided he wants to be soft like Bryan Danielson. We need a third member who is going to be as bloodthirsty as we are. So, hey, if you are on the roster and you want to be a trios champion and you want to be standing alongside the Blackpool Combat Club, you need to prove to us that you have the same drive. And then we can see some people over the next few weeks in whatever capacity, whatever the people that you are. Maybe some of them could be funny segments. Maybe some of them could be really serious. Some of them have to be really serious segments, obviously. But take people that aren't doing anything right now and have them try to win over the Blackpool Combat Club. Have somebody like I don't know if I would really necessarily go with Ortiz because he's on the older end, but like,
I know the perfect person for this.
Daniel Garcia?
No, Josh Woods.
See, Josh Woods is a guy that I don't know well enough, but
that's the point. You need to be someone that you don't know well.
That's exactly where I can kind of get into there. Like, I know a little bit about Lee Moriarty, but I don't know enough about him to be like, okay, well, Lee Moriarty would be the best fit for it, or Josh Woods, or oh god, what's his name? The Outsiders that I'm thinking of that I just had in my brain. Josh Barnett. Like that's a name that like I know people are tossing around.
He's way too old for this. So.
Is he? I don't know what his age was. I don't know. Like I know the name and I know he's involved in the Bloodsport thing. That's pretty much all I know.
But, well, he runs the Bloodsport things. That could give you an idea about how old he is.
So. Okay, yeah. Then maybe never mind. But yeah, like
Anthony Henry could do it.
Maybe him. Like yeah.
It needs to be someone that fits that mold. It can't just be any random person. Like you can't just throw Dalton Castle into it.
Yeah.
As much as I'd love it, you can't throw the Beast Mortos into that as well. It's like it needs to be someone that fits into the whole.
Ideally younger, so that they can be a pupil in that sense. But you throw in somebody that like can stand out, like a Daniel Garcia type. Let's just use him as another example. And you have him or whoever it might be beat the shit out of some people and do something that ends up being like, all right, kid, you got some chutzpah. Let's bring you into the fold. And then that gives you somebody else that can feud with Wheeler Yuta. That gives you the excommunication of Wheeler Yuta means that you can have Claudio versus Yuta. You got a Pac against Yuta. You could have Moxley against Yuta going forward as just like, if you just do one match alone with that, that's already 3 weeks worth of material right there, just those matches alone. And then that gives Yuta an out to not be in this group anymore and to do stuff on his own, and gives another spot to a guy like a Josh Woods or whoever to get that kind of a push and to start kind of building up another person in there. Because Yuta's at a point now where I don't feel like continuing with the Blackpool Combat Club is really going to help him out. I think he's good enough. Let him do his own thing.
Yeah. I think that the whole story for Yuta needs to end, or not for him, just his career entirely, but like this whole narrative needs to end with him beating Jon Moxley. Because that's the one thing that he's never done. Well, there's lots of things in that, like the whole story of the Combat Club started with him having matches with Moxley, and the big match that he had one of Rampage's greatest matches, if like Rampage is going away soon, was the match that he had with Moxley on there, where like he was busted wide open and he earns their respect and he writes BCC in his own blood on his chest afterwards. It's like, so eventually he has to beat Moxley, and eventually if the whole narrative of this is that they're going to take out people that haven't fulfilled their potential in AEW or been like stuck in the same place, then that's going to lead to some kind of like inter roster rivalry between kind of like the OG upstarts that again going to try and utilize this new iteration of the Blackpool Combat Club in order to kickstart their careers. So hopefully it all goes well. I mean, this is already off to a much better start than the Elite versus Tony Khan storyline, so hopefully this one has more of a positive impact.
Yeah, that just kind of died out, didn't it?
Yeah, but that's probably for the best.
And then, some other little things that happened throughout the episode too, like Orange Cassidy beat Chris Jericho. Jericho's like, I'm not done with you yet. I mean, you're not done after that horrific instance of all that change mildly falling on top of your car, But
I mean, I kind of wish it was over because
that
match wasn't particularly great. Jericho is kind of hitting a lot of like 5 out of 10s at the moment.
Yuka Sakazaki, and one of my favorite names to say, and Queen Aminata defeated Serena Deeb and Mariah May. That set up a title match for the AEW Women's World Championship, where Mariah May is going to obviously defeat Yuka Sakazaki.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But the whole story about that isn't really the match itself. No. It's Mina Shirakawa.
Yeah.
Because Mariah May said that she needs Mina Shirakawa to be there to properly celebrate her title win. So Mina's going to come out. And
Marina Shirakawa. That's the mix of Marina Shafir and Mariah May and Mina Shirakawa.
Yeah. So Mina Shirakawa.
You know who she is. Yeah. So that's cool. They're gonna bring her back in there.
Yeah, and see how that ends up going. I think there's more speculation than ever that Shirakawa's going to join AEW permanently, because she really isn't being utilised at all in Stardom right now. So I imagine that the move to, and she is apparently moving to the USA as well, so it seems likely that will be the destination she lands in. So
That's cool.
I imagine that will end up in, well, there's one of two ways. Either they do reunite permanently, and like you have this kind of tag team force now, her being the kind of heater for Mariah May in the championship position, like someone that helps her retain and take out the people, or the likelihood is because she's so popular that she doesn't go with Mariah May and they end up having the match at Wrestle Dream for the title.
That's where I'm kind of leaning. I think that makes the most sense.
But yeah, as I say, it was one of the rare kind of DQs as well, and in fairness, like the whole Mariah May thing still isn't working as her being champion right now, so but maybe reintroducing Mina Shirakawa, that was a big part of the whole storyline leading up to it, will help like reignite things for her.
Hook had beat JD Inc. by submission, and he's going to be going up against Roderick Strong for the FTW title on Collision. That aspect of there. I think that's the only one that's confirmed for Collision. I think the rest of them are kind of implied to be Dynamite, but they might be moving them around. Kind of depends. I expect Hook to retain over Roderick Strong. Here's something I wanted to ask you about. I don't think we've talked about this yet. How do you feel about this whole idea? Like, why is Roderick Strong teaming so much up with like the Beast Mortos and all instead of the Undisputed Kingdom? What do you think's happening there?
I think I just genuinely think it's just they want to get the Beast Mortos on TV.
It kind of feels like that to me too, but like it seems like they keeps hanging around Roderick Strong quite a bit more than anybody.
Well, they're having a big 10-man tag on this week's Collision.
Yeah, the All-Star 10-man tag is what? It's Hook, the Outrunners, and FTR?
Yes, Hook, the Outrunners, and FTR versus Undisputed Kingdom of Roderick Strong, Bennett and Taven, Roosh, who's like
bounces seemingly around part of things too.
Was seemingly part of the Don Callis family, and obviously the Beast Mortos in there as well. So yeah, I don't think there's anything like majorly about it. I think it just literally comes down to the fact they just want to put the Beast Mortos in as many matches as possible.
Oh, they want to do Beast Mortos in some matches, as many as possible. They got to make sure that they can at least tell Ricochet to hit some of those moves. And that, my God, that one stomp in that match is the talking point out of the whole thing. And it's like, Ricochet's so good in the ring, and Beast Mortos is so fun too. And that whiff just ruins so much of the magic. And the promo afterward that Ricochet had didn't help either. But
that was. I mean, I'd say that was the best promo I've seen him cut in the last 5 years or so.
From Ricochet?
Yeah.
Is that really saying much?
Well, no, he's not. He's not a great promo, but yeah, I'd say it's what with Kick, but like the overall match was very good. And as they just want to put, they need to do something with Mortos long term because he's just the best base in wrestling right now. So hopefully they do find something for him to do. I'd be totally fine if he was just part of a makeshift crew that won the trios titles at Grand Slam. But yeah, I think that. Yeah, but I mean, they decided to use that as okay, Ricochet's won 3 matches in a row now, so now he's going to go after Ospreay, and they're going to have their match for the International Championship on the anniversary edition of Dynamite.
Yeah, one special episode after another kind of thing, and yeah, I mean, Will Ospreay's already got something going on for Grand Slam. He and Kyle Fletcher are teaming up against the Young Bucks for the tag titles, which I fully expect. They're not winning those tag titles, but that should be a fun match.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the trios match they had on this show is anything to go by with Ospreay, Fletcher, and Takeshita against the Bucks and Okada, that was a super fun match. Really good finishing sequence, and obviously the outcome of the tag match because they had Fletcher pin Matt Jackson on this show, so obviously they're going to lose the match at Dynamite, but. I think it's quite interesting as well. They showed the big United Empire logo at the end of it as well. So maybe there's room for Mark Davis to come back soon and just fully reunite the trio as part of that. And maybe they're going against the Don Callis family. I think it would. Initially, I thought the route they were going to take is Fletcher would turn on Ospreay off the back of either this or something else, and start a rivalry. I kind of don't want that to happen. I think Fletcher's really working as a babyface, and I think that's the direction they should go. I think they really should go United Empire, and then the Don Callis family being a collection of. But then again, Takeshi's action as a babyface as well. I think realistically, Don Callis should just fuck off. It's kind of the general.
He should probably take on some other people that need some direction, because he still is a great mouthpiece.
Oh yeah, but these three guys are quite beloved by the audience in general, and like Takeshi's feuding with Okada for the most part, and Okada's firmly heel, and Fletcher's doing well as a babyface. He's showing a lot more fire and energy, and Ospreay's obviously like one of the most other guys in the company. So I don't think any of them really work with Don Callis right now.
No, I think that outside of the idea of Takeshita having a mouthpiece in general, and that being something that you can even get around in some ways, Callis as a heel, Callis is always going to be a heel. Like, there's no way that guy's going to work as babyface. And when you want to put these people over as babyfaces, I think that the best way to do that is to have them say fuck off to him, and to like cement that as we're moving on. We're turning a new leaf. We're not going to be associated with the scumbag character. And then you bring that scumbag in with, like a Beast Mortos or whoever you might, there's plenty of people on the roster that can use a little bit more of a direction, and then you can tag them up and, create another stable out of that. And just kind of, look at the Heenan family. The Heenan family changed people all the time. It wasn't just the same three people or so. They just got new. I took on the managerial role of this person. Oh, I bought the contract out from Ted DiBiase. Oh, I switched up something with Slick, Slick. Wow, it's the last time we brought Slick up on a podcast. But I'm looking forward to that match. Generally speaking, I'm looking forward to any of these kind of things. Looking forward to Moxley versus Darby Allin. I still kind of on the fence about what that means, though, because it seems like it's got to be Moxley wins, and then fights.
I would say so, yeah.
Danielson at Wrestle Dream, but then I don't know when Darby Allin gets that title shot.
Well, seemingly never. Well, at least not for a while anyway. Because this will lose his title shot if he does lose to Moxley. I mean, you'd assume that Moxley's going to win, but maybe they decide to just subvert expectations by having Allin get a shock win, and like Moxley, who's been so kind of bravado about the fact that like this is their company now, and like they're there to take out the young guys. If the young guy does manage to topple him over, and then maybe even beat Danielson at Wrestle Dream, and then you have like in Darby Allin's celebration, and like Danielson goes off into the sunset, then you have Moxley, come out with like an ice pick or something like that, and just starts carving into Darby Allin, and then you have an even more like.
He's got two hypodermic needles.
Like a hateful match at and
a paperback.
At Full Gear or something.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely it's definitely not a foregone conclusion one way or the other, but that makes it more exciting. Like a lot of the matches, it's like you can probably like have a pretty sizable guess on a lot of them. Some of them obviously more obvious than others. Like Morrow May is definitely going to win, and the Bucks are more than likely going to win. But this one has an edge of doubt to it. Like you feel like Moxley is the obvious one, but Darby Allin always has the potential to surprise you. So
the fact that it is happening in Tacoma means that the whole Washington element of it is kind of up in the air, because for all you know, maybe they have plans for Darby Allin to fight Danielson and win the title there, or maybe the whole point is to have Moxley fight him there, so that way it could be really lots of boos for Moxley, or I don't know. There was also this is a spoiler for Rampage, but I don't think anybody cares. Jamie Hayter's going to fight Saraya. Sure.
yeah, that was expected, and yeah, Jamie Hayter will win. So
yeah. So the last one to talk about then is Nigel McGuinness versus Bryan Danielson, which oddly enough they still did not confirm.
Well, that's the whole story. The whole story is that. So they have clarified. They clarified this. We talked about how it was really like clunky way of putting it together. They did do some sort of salvage job. Again, it was never going to be perfect, but they managed to do something, which is essentially that Nigel McGuinness, upon hearing that Danielson was not going to make was initially not going to make Grand Slam due to the injuries that he suffered at the hands of Moxley, decided to go to Tony Khan and like issue the challenge essentially, and saying that he's got this contract which says that if Bryan Danielson is available, then I'm going to fight him at Grand Slam. And with the kind of message being that if Danielson doesn't show up because he's too injured, then McGuinness gets to lord over the fact that him being like a coward that couldn't show up and face him like a man. So that's basically the whole story they're kind of telling, is the idea that he's made this challenge kind of with almost a presumption that either Danielson won't make it, and if Danielson does show enough pride to make it, then he's going to be so physically weak that McGuinness is going to be able to get the victory over him. So, and it's not a title match or anything like that, because they wouldn't be able to agree to that. It wouldn't be fair anyway, but I don't think that's what Nigel cares about. He just cares about beating Danielson. I don't think he cares about, obviously he would want to be the champion. Actually, if he beats Danielson, he'd probably be interested in having a title shot, but that's, again, adds somewhat of an interesting dynamic, because you'd assume that the match is going to happen. I think there is a faint possibility the match doesn't happen, because you just decide to sell the injury and you use this for McGuinness to lord over it, and then you do eventually have Danielson versus McGuinness, potentially at like, I mean, let's envision a scenario where this match doesn't take place and McGuinness is just like crowing about it for ages. Then you have Danielson potentially lose the title, Wrestle Dream, and he basically feels like he's going to retire, but he says, I have one final thing that I need to do, and then he faces McGuinness at Full Gear or something.
Yeah, and it's like, that's effectively the end of his career from the losing the title, but not, hey, I lost the title and 6 minutes later I'm cutting my retirement speech. Yeah. It could just be, I'm gonna end it, but I do need to have this one more match left, and I need to put that guy in his place and tell him to fuck off. Yeah.
But then there is obviously the more likely possibility that the match does take place. But then I also think that it's not a foregone conclusion that Danielson wins.
Right, because it is a non-title match if that ends up being the case. So you could just end up being like, hey, set up another number one contender. And it could be a matter of like Blackpool Combat Club comes out and costs Danielson, and that pushes that feud.
I think if they decide to go the route of Danielson losing, they just have McGuinness beat him straight up.
Yeah, I'd be down for it.
Because Danielson's hurt still. Like, you have Danielson come out with, being worse for wear, taped up, and McGuinness just takes advantage of that and gets the victory. Then what I would do, again, if I was booking, would be you have Danielson versus Moxley at Wrestle Dream, and Danielson looks like he's lost, but he manages to rally and he beats Jon Moxley to retain the title. Then you have McGuinness, who's got the victory over Danielson, saying, well, now I want the title shot. And so you do that match at Full Gear. And then potentially even after that match, because of how he's so there's like multiple different routes you could take, because you still question with that contract, how much Nigel loves Christian on commentary. Mm-hmm. If like Christian was to get involved in that match, or to, or like have Danielson beat McGuinness and then Christian immediately comes out to try and cash in, or hell, have McGuinness win the title and then have Christian try and cash in on him. It's like there's different routes you can take on a lot of this stuff, but yeah, it is quite interesting to have like these multiple moving parts of people that could or could not be fighting for the title soon. But yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm more interested in having McGuinness beat Danielson. I don't think that will happen, but I don't think that will happen. But it's the more interesting route for me.
McGuinness had cleared up a little bit about his past and saying that he hadn't been signed for WWE to wrestle because of an arm injury, not the like concussion, hepatitis type stuff that like had gone around for a little while, and that he just wanted to make sure that he like provided better financially in a different capacity instead of continuing to wrestle for Ring of Honor, because that wasn't going to be actually like paying the bills and all. So I'm really glad to see McGuinness doing this kind of stuff right now. I want to see him I don't know, maybe just continue to wrestle. But I'm all for seeing this title match or non-title match or whatever segment they decide to do. I think that's going to be one of the biggest draws for me for sure. So I'm looking forward to Grand Slam. And, we got some good stuff on the docket for that. And obviously next week, after that is the case, we'll round out our hot tags, talk about how that stuff had happened. By then we'll know the results from Collision as well, because we're going to be taping that in advance. So that'll probably be one of the biggest things we talk about on the hot tags for next week. Hopefully not crazy hot tags in like a bad way to add on top of that, but maybe some other cool stories to talk about. And as I mentioned before, we've got the fan announce table of In Your House Bad Blood coming up next week. Going to be recording some other stuff in the meantime. I don't know exactly when, but stay tuned for the Dark Cast for October of ranking. It used to be ranking old pay-per-view names that we don't see anymore. That now list has expanded, and I've just decided to basically quadruple the length of this, because I went, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do all the pay-per-view names. If I do that, I might as well do all the pay-per-view names for WCW and ECW as well. If I do that, I might as well do all the TV show names for all these things too. So it's going to be instead ranking in a tier list every TV show and pay-per-view and special event name from WWE, NXT, WCW, and ECW. So that might take a while. I don't know. I'm going to record that at some point. I'm going to do this Ultimate Halloween Havoc thing, which I might still make a couple little changes now that I had opened up this NWA roster and I'm seeing some people. So I'm like, maybe I'll throw in, even if I don't know who the hell these people are, maybe I'll throw in this Gags the Gimp person and do something funny with him, or Magic Jake Dumas or something. Mecha Wolf is somebody's name. Alex Misery. Okay. We'll see. Maybe I'll end up playing around with some of those names too. But of course, if you want us to do something special and you have something in mind, pick a poison tier. It's the best way to ensure that happens. If you want to just toss your suggestions in the comments below as well, I always take that into consideration. And anything that we might have forgotten on the hot tags, let us know. We'll drop it in the comments too. We'll try to respond to that. But in the meantime, keep checking smark.com. Go around to fanboysanonymous.com for anything that happens on that front, on the Blue Brand. And go to the link tree at amangotree.com. You'll find links to those two websites and all these things associated with them. And anything else that I've got linked up on there. Follow me at Tony Mango on most of those platforms. Make sure you're also following Callum.
Yep, you can follow me on Twitter at WickMost14. Check out the Power Rankings over on smarkandmo.com every Saturday, where I rank the WWE superstars based on their prior week's performances. And while you're there, you can head on over to the Fantasy League, also at WWEFantasyLeague.com, to see how our rosters are doing, who's picking up points as we head towards Bad Blood, and then subsequently on to every other pay-per-view before WrestleMania, to see who is the ultimate winner at the end of this season.
Okay, everybody, that's it for number 668. We will see you next time, and in the meantime, adios. We hope you have a great day. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we are being counted out.